Lake George Battlefield Moments, a production of Lake George Battlefield Park Alliance, preserving our area's incredible history. Here's the president of Lake George Battlefield Park Alliance, John DiNuzzo.
Welcome to Lake George Battlefield Moments. Our guest is Mark Silo, historian and a key member of the Battlefield Park Alliance's Curation Committee, which determines what goes on display in our visitor center. Welcome, Mark.
Thank you, John. Good to be here.
Well, it's good to have you as always, my friend. This podcast will focus on what's new for 2026 at the Battlefield Park Visitor Center and what public programs we're planning for the next few months. So, Mark, first the Visitor Center. What's new?
Well, we do have a few things to brag about that have been added last year, and we look forward to this year. We have a brand new diorama of the Battle of Lake George done by a man named Steve Kyer. One of our trustees, Bruce Fenner, saw his work at another museum and enlisted him to come here and learn a bit about the Battle of Lake George and put together this diorama for us. It focuses on a key point in the battle, which was where the Colonial Road, now Fort George Road, crossed through the American lines, where they had quickly built some breastworks as the French were approaching. So he has his very realistic diorama done of the American force, the British American force behind their line, and the approach by the French regulars, some regiments from France in full uniform that marched down along the road right into the face of three cannon that the British Americans had lined up along the road, and it was a bloody mess for the French. After that, the battle kind of changed its shape.
And what else you got going on at the Visitor Center?
Well, right now we have being built is a model of the sloop Earl of Halifax, a small British warship that was built here at Lake George. It ran up and down the lake with the British forces as they came and went through the major campaigns of the French and Indian War in the 1750s. It's going to be a very accurate model. It's going to measure about 4 feet in size, I think it is, and we look forward to having that. We have also, that were added last year, some remnants of the bateau that were found in Lake George. Bateau were I guess you'd call them large rowboats oared by a number of men, 30 foot long. They were the go-to for moving troops and supplies. Some of them remain sunk in Lake George, and some of these remnants are now on display in our museum.
Great. And we have the usual array of artifacts and such, and exhibits, paintings and so forth that have been on display since the Visitor Center first opened in 2022. But certainly there's a new energy, a new enthusiasm, I think, that the new Memorial Plaza has generated. And we'll have a lot of people there who've never been in the Visitor Center before. So a lot of this will be fresh for them, don't you think? I
think so. We have a lot going on, and it's certainly going to bring people to the battlefield and to the Visitor Center. That includes last year when those 3 terrific statues within the park were refurbished, and we did some programs around them. We're going to be doing more programs this year, as always. We'll always have a trickle of new things coming into the museum. We have a couple of mortar bombs that we added last year. We have a few cannonballs that were found in the area that we're going to get on display this coming summer. So it's kind of a dynamic place, as well as John said, being well equipped with displays and interpretation maps that we've had since the place opened in 2022.
Okay, the Visitor Center is at 75 Fort George Road. That's the old military road, Lake George. It's the bottom floor of the Lake George Park Commission headquarters building. And it's open at this point on weekends, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and Memorial Day, the immediate weekend from 10 in the morning till 4 in the afternoon. And then we go to 5 days a week, Thursday through Monday, starting July the 2nd.
Okay, so we have a lot going on in the Visitor Center, and there will be some new stuff, and we have a number of programs that will be taking place. And John, what do we have on that?
Well, almost all of our public programs, except where we incur costs, are free to the public. And that's the vast majority. And we have several coming up in the next several weeks that are very special. I think they're in sync with the 250th anniversary of the American Revolution, as well as the now new reinterment site, the Repose of the Fallen Plaza. So first off, June the 20th is a Saturday. That's Pass Through History weekend in New York State parks. And on Saturday the 20th, we're going to do a very special presentation called The Fallen Heroes of Lake George Battlefield Park. Through that, we will take people to the now 2 sites in the Battlefield Park where we have reinterred remains of victims of war. We've had since 1930s had the remains of 4 unknown soldiers who died in the Battle of Lake George in 1755. So we're going to pay tribute to them. We'll be helped in that by Fort William Henry to talk about the French and Indian War, talk about the Battle of Lake George, and talk about how those 4 remains, those unknown soldiers, considered to be the oldest recognized unknown soldiers buried in the U.S. by the federal government. We'll tell about their story. And then, of course, a short distance away, probably no more than 50 feet, is the new Repose of the Fallen Plaza, where we have 44 individuals who died of smallpox in the summer of 1776 at Continental Army Hospital that is at Fort George in our Battlefield Park. So we'll do a tour of those 2 sites, 11 in the morning, 1 o'clock in the afternoon. It's free. It'll take about an hour, and we'll be your hosts to tell the stories of those soldiers. Then the following day, June the 21st, which is actually Father's Day, we'll have a more traditional tour of all the sites within the Battlefield Park going on. For all these, you can go to our website, lakegeorgebattlefield.org, or you can contact us, info@lakegeorgebattlefield.org. We will ask people to register for these events so we are able to be sure we're ready for whatever crowds of people come. Shortly thereafter, June the 25th, on a Thursday night, Joseph W. Zarzinski, very well-known historian, maritime archaeologist in the region, will be speaking on warships of the French and Indian War. Czar is an Alliance member and also a principal of the French and Indian War Society, so we're co-sponsoring it with the society. And that'll take place, as I said, 7 o'clock, June the 25th at Fort William Henry. And Czar will talk about the warships and how that kind of segued into what was used on the lake during the Revolution in terms of battles. As this place, Lake George being between Lake Champlain and the Hudson River, was still a major waterway and transportation route used by all sides through the American Revolution. So Czar will take us through the warships that were used and why they were used, what their functions were. And then on July the 9th, July the 10th is actually the 250th anniversary of the opening of this smallpox hospital at Fort George. And to quickly trace that story, as after the failed invasion of Canada by the Continental Forces in late 1775, early 1776, the defeated Continental troops retreated back south to, first of all, the Crown Point, and then ultimately the sick ones infected with smallpox were separated from the healthy ones, and the healthy ones went to Fort Ticonderoga. The sick ones went to Fort George, and beginning July the 10th of 1776, over 3,000 were treated at Fort George. It's estimated that probably somewhere around a third of that total died at Lake George, which is why, as we have reinterred 44, we know there are probably hundreds of others who are buried in the area whose remains have never been discovered. And, most will likely never be rediscovered. But on July the 9th, which is a Thursday night again, we're going to have 3 very special guests talk about the 250th anniversary of the Fort George Smallpox Hospital, including Michael Gabriel, who is the author of a biography of General Richard Montgomery, who is the commanding officer of the Continental troops who attempted to take Canada, and ultimately General Montgomery was killed on New Year's Eve, 1775. And we'll have Sam Huntington, the manager of the Crown Point Historic Site, where those infected soldiers came back to and ultimately were sent to Lake George for their treatment there. And then finally, Dr. Richard Leach, infectious disease specialist, a local who's spoken for many groups before about the history of smallpox, how it was treated, and ultimately the strategy that assisted, generated by General George Washington, to basically inoculate the soldiers with from smallpox by infecting them with a lesser case of it. So that program will be 6:30 in the evening at the Fort William Henry Conference Center. It'll include a question and answer with these 3 experts, and we'll, I think, pay appropriate tribute at that point to the landmark of the smallpox hospital, considered the largest Continental Army hospital during the American Revolution. So that's just in the immediate future what we have lined up programmatically. Mark told you about the exhibits at the Visitor Center. We've got a lot going on, don't we, Mark?
We certainly do. There's a lot of history here, and we aim to get into all of it.
We sure do. Mark, thanks for all your work in support of Lake George Battlefield Park Alliance and our region's history. It's been indispensable, and your work continues to give great benefit to us.
Well, thank you. I hope so.
Our website, lakegeorgebattlefield.org, and we thank you for being a part of our history. Take care, folks.
Lake George Battlefield Moments, a production of Lake George Battlefield Park Alliance, preserving our area's incredible history. For more information or to check out the latest podcast, go to lakegeorgebattlefield.org and listen live on Saturday mornings to Lake George Battlefield Moments on 93.5 Lake FM.